I was standing in the dim light of the club, eyes fixed on her. The music was pounding, making my blood race, every beat like a pulse inside my head. I was fucked up, and I knew she was too. I could see it in the way she moved, swaying with a rhythm that seemed to flow from somewhere deep within her. My mind was foggy, but I couldn't stop staring. She was beautiful, intoxicating even. Her hips swayed, her body a blur of motion that I couldn't pull my eyes from. Probably on something. Hell, so was I. That's why we were both here. The smoke, the lights, the sweat, it all just melted together into a world I didn't want to leave. And then she turned. Her eyes scanned the room and I froze. There was no way she could see me, not with the shadows swallowing me whole. Still, I couldn't help myself. I was stuck in place, watching her like a predator. She wasn't looking for me, but in that moment, I was certain she felt my gaze. A shiver ran down my spine, a strange mix of anticipation and dread. The lights flickered, and just as quickly, she was gone again, swallowed up by the crowd. I cursed under my breath and followed her, weaving through bodies that didn't matter to me. Nothing else did, just her. My heart was pounding now, every second feeling like it stretched into eternity. The bass vibrated through the floor, a constant reminder of the altered state I was in. My senses were heightened, amplified by whatever concoction I'd ingested earlier. The world was a kaleidoscope of flashing lights and distorted sounds, and she was the only focal point, the only color that mattered in this chaotic landscape. But then, like clockwork, I fucked it up. Some kid, probably a couple years younger than me, spotted me. I barely remembered his name, but I wasn't in the mood for this. I dealt with his kind before, always looking for something. A quick high, a cheap thrill. They were leeches, clinging to the fringes of the scene, desperate for a connection, a fix. "What's up, man? Got anything?" he asked, practically bouncing on his heels. His eyes were wide, eager, the kind of eyes that held a desperate hunger. I could feel the irritation building up, but I didn't let it show. My patience was wearing thin, like a thread frayed at the edges. "Nah. Go see Tony," I muttered, pushing him away. "Ah, come on." He moved closer, all teeth and desperate energy. "Help me out." I didn't have time for this. The girl was slipping away, and I needed her. I needed to unravel the mystery she presented, to understand the darkness that flickered in her eyes, the way she seemed to inhabit a different plane of existence. So I turned, shaking him off, and went back to searching. Where the hell had she gone? The crowd was a swirling mass of bodies, a sea of faces that all blurred together. The music was a relentless force, a pounding rhythm that pulsed through my veins, but it couldn't drown out the frantic pounding of my heart. I scanned the room, my heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't see her anymore. Fuck. With a sigh, I turned for the exit. I was done. If tonight wasn't it, then it wasn't going to happen. I couldn't chase her forever, not in this haze of confusion and desire. I needed to clear my head, to regain some semblance of control. I couldn't keep searching for her in this state of perpetual intoxication. As I stepped outside into the cool air, the rain had started, light at first, then heavier, the chill creeping under my skin. The sudden shift in temperature was a shock to my system, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the club. I fumbled through my jacket for a cigarette, lighting it quickly, the flame flickering in the dark. My hands were shaking. I was coming down. The euphoria was fading, replaced by a creeping sense of unease and vulnerability. The world was sharpening into focus, the edges no longer blurred, and the harsh reality of my situation was starting to sink in. I should have hit Tony up for more, but it was too late now. Then I heard it. Her voice. "Got a light?" I turned fast, already thinking it was some random chick. But no, it was her. The one I'd been stalking all night. The one who had consumed my every thought, the source of this inexplicable obsession. "Sure." I handed her the lighter, trying to keep my composure. My heart was still racing, and I couldn't decide whether I wanted to kiss her or strangle her. All I knew was that I had to keep her here. I had her now, a fleeting moment of triumph in the midst of my descending high. She inhaled deeply, her eyes locking onto mine. For a split second, I almost forgot everything else. It was just her. I could feel her energy, the way it flowed between us, like some invisible thread pulling me closer. I couldn't look away, captivated by the enigmatic intensity in her gaze. "Are you from around here?" Her voice broke through the silence, and I barely heard her words, lost in the vortex of my own thoughts and emotions. I shrugged, keeping my cool. "No." She tilted her head, narrowing her eyes a little. "Funny, you look familiar." I gave her my best grin, a forced expression that felt hollow in the face of her perceptive gaze. "Maybe I got one of those faces," I said, trying to brush it off. She didn't know. None of them did. The truth, the dark underbelly of my existence, was a secret I guarded jealously. She said, and then smiled back. "You want to get a coffee or something?" I couldn't help but smile at that. She was more than I expected. And I wasn't about to let this slip away. Not after chasing her through the smoky labyrinth of the club, not after the near misses and the frustrated sighs. "Sure." We headed to a cafe nearby, and the whole time, she kept talking, but I barely heard her. I was too focused on the way her lips moved, the way she shifted in her seat, the subtle gestures that hinted at a hidden depth beneath her seemingly casual demeanor. She was playing with me. And I wasn't about to lose. Not this time. It was getting colder outside, and the rain was coming down harder. She caught me staring, and there was something about her that drew me in, a magnetism that transcended words and logic. Her lips were smudged from the coffee, and her hair was a mess, but she was perfect. Imperfectly perfect, like a shattered mirror reflecting a distorted image of beauty. She offered to get us another coffee, and as I handed her a cigarette, I caught the little things, her eyes, the way she carried herself. She knew what she was doing. She wasn't as innocent as she looked. She was aware of everything. We exchanged small talk, but it was all just noise. The way she moved, the way her eyes flicked around, kept me on edge. I could feel it, the tension building, the moment stretching between us like a tight wire, poised to snap. Finally, she broke the silence. "Wanna get out of here?" It was like everything clicked. I nodded, grinning like an idiot. "Okay." I drove her back to my place, my mind spinning with all the possibilities. But as soon as we were alone, it was clear she knew exactly what she was doing. She was playing me, just like I wanted her to. A game of cat and mouse, with both of us equally entangled in the pursuit. And when her lips finally met mine, I knew we were past the point of no return. The rest of the night went by in a haze of sweat and blood, of tangled sheets and desperate touches. It was a dance of primal urges and unspoken desires, a whirlwind of passion and chaos. It wasn't love. It was something darker, something more raw and untamed. It wasn't until I had her pinned beneath me, her blood spilling slowly from the wound I'd made, that I realized she'd been just as lost as I was. She'd known exactly what she was doing when she walked into my life. Her darkness mirrored my own, and in that moment of shared depravity, we found a twisted connection. Her final breath was a soft gasp, and I couldn't help but kiss her once more, tasting the blood that flowed between us. It was a macabre communion, a final act of possession in a night consumed by obsession. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away the remnants of our twisted encounter. The city lights blurred through the rain-streaked windows, a silent witness to the night's descent into madness. And I, the predator who had finally caught his prey, was left alone in the aftermath, the echoes of her final gasp ringing in my ears, a haunting reminder of the darkness that resided within us both. It was late summer in the outskirts of New Orleans. The heat clung to the air, thick with humidity, as I pulled my truck into the shadowy lot of an old, run-down building on the edge of the French Quarter. The place had once been a speakeasy during Prohibition, but now it was little more than a hushed whisper among locals. A spot where stories of the past lingered in the air, and the smell of danger was always on the horizon, The paint on the building was peeling, the faded signage barely visible in the dim light. The windows were grimy, offering only obscured glimpses of the interior. It was the kind of place that whispered secrets, a haven for those who sought darkness and anonymity. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but I knew I wouldn't find it in the bright lights of Bourbon Street. This was a place for shadows, for hidden desires and whispered promises. I had heard rumors, dark, twisted rumors, about a woman who frequented the place. People called her Lola. They said she had a presence that could freeze you in place, like an animal caught in the headlights of a truck barreling down the road. Her beauty wasn't just skin deep, it was something primal, something that clawed at your soul. Some said she was a siren, luring men to their doom with her intoxicating allure. Others claimed she was a succubus, a creature of the night that fed on the life force of those she entangled. There was a morbid fascination that drew me to this place, a desire to unravel the mysteries that swirled around Lola. I had heard snippets of her story, whispers in dimly lit bars and hushed conversations in smoky backrooms. She was said to have been a dancer, a performer who had captivated audiences with her grace and charisma. But those who knew her best spoke of a darkness within her, a coldness that chilled them to the bone. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, or what I hoped to find. Perhaps a glimpse into the heart of this enigma, a chance to understand the allure that drew so many towards her. Or maybe it was simply the thrill of the unknown, the intoxicating danger that pulsed beneath the surface of this weathered building. I first saw her through the fogged window of the bar, the dim lighting casting shadows on her face. She sat alone, her legs crossed, a cigarette dangling lazily between her fingers. Her red lips parted slightly as she stared into her drink, her eyes clouded with secrets. Her hair, a cascade of midnight black, framed her face in a delicate veil. She wore a simple black dress that clung to her curves, highlighting an elegance that was both alluring and intimidating. But it wasn't just her beauty that pulled me in. There was something else, something that called to me, as if I had no choice but to answer. It was a primal tug, a magnetic force that drew me towards her like a moth to a flame. I felt a strange sense of urgency, a need to be near her, to unravel the mysteries that surrounded her. I walked in, the creaking door announcing my presence. The air inside was thick and stale, a haze of cigarette smoke and cheap perfume clinging to the atmosphere. The bar was sparsely decorated, with faded velvet curtains and a worn wooden bar that had witnessed countless stories unfold over the years. A few patrons sat scattered around the room, their faces obscured by the dim lighting, their conversations muted and indistinct. Her gaze lifted, locking onto mine with a predatory precision that made my heart race. The air between us thickened, electric with the weight of the unspoken. It was as if time itself had slowed down, the only sound the rhythmic clinking of ice cubes in a nearby glass. "You're late," she said, her voice low, honeyed but dangerous. The words were like velvet claws, caressing my ears while threatening to tear me apart. "I was starting to wonder if you had the guts to come." I took a seat across from her, my skin crawling with a mixture of fear and desire. The scent of her perfume, an intoxicating blend of jasmine and something darker, filled my senses. It was a heady aroma that stirred something deep within me, a longing that I couldn't explain. "I'm here now," I muttered, not sure what had drawn me in. Something told me it wasn't just the alcohol or the rumors. There was an undeniable pull, a magnetism that I couldn't resist. Lola smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of her lips that made my stomach twist. "I don't bite, unless you asked me to." Her eyes held a mischievous glint, as if she knew the depths of my desires, the secret yearnings that simmered beneath the surface. Her words were like a challenge, and I couldn't resist. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a mixture of fear and anticipation rattling in my throat. She leaned in, the scent of her perfume intensifying, enveloping me in its intoxicating embrace. "I want everything. I want your mind, your body, your soul." She licked her lips, as if savoring the taste of her own words, relishing the power she held over me. I felt my pulse quicken as she slid her fingers across the table, tracing the edge of my hand with a feather-light touch. My body betrayed me, a sharp hunger spreading through me as her nails grazed the skin on my palm. It was a strange sensation, a mixture of pleasure and unease, a dance between attraction and fear. "Do you know what it's like to be consumed?" she whispered, her voice a seductive rasp that sent shivers down my spine. "To feel every part of you unravel under my touch?" Before I could respond, Lola stood, her heels clicking on the wood floor like a countdown. She moved closer, her body swaying with a rhythm that felt both hypnotic and dangerous. It was a mesmerizing dance, a predator circling its prey, her every move calculated and precise. Without warning, she grabbed my wrist and pulled me out of the chair. I stumbled, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to regain my balance. "Come with me," she commanded, her voice a sharp whip that sent a thrill down my spine. It was a command, not a request, and I felt a strange sense of obedience, a willingness to follow her into the unknown. I didn't hesitate. I followed her, as she led me through the dimly lit back hallways, the air growing cooler with each step. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the silence became, the more everything felt wrong. The familiar sounds of the bar faded, replaced by an unnerving quiet that seemed to press in on me from all sides. But I couldn't pull away. My body felt numb, my will overridden by an unseen force that propelled me forward. We entered a room that smelled of old leather and something metallic, a scent that lingered in the air like a forgotten memory. There was a large, four-poster bed in the center, the thick curtains drawn shut, creating a secluded haven of darkness. The air was heavy with something darker, a palpable sense of foreboding that hung in the air. Lola turned to face me, her eyes glinting with something feral, something that made my heart race. "You wanted this," she purred. "Now you'll get it. All of it." She pushed me onto the bed, straddling me with a predatory grace that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Her hands worked quickly, tearing at my clothes, leaving me exposed and vulnerable beneath her. The fabric ripped and tore, the sounds echoing in the oppressive silence of the room. I felt a strange mixture of shame and excitement, a sense of surrender as I relinquished control. Her lips found mine in a brutal kiss, her teeth grazing my bottom lip, drawing blood. It was sharp, painful, intoxicating. A strange mix of sensations flooded through me, a confusing blend of agony and pleasure. I kissed her back, the taste of blood mixing with the desperate need that was rapidly consuming me. It was a primal dance, a desperate attempt to grasp onto something, anything, in the face of the unknown. But the pleasure was mixed with a strange, suffocating dread. Lola's movements were frantic, violent, as if she was trying to rip something from me. I could feel her nails digging into my skin, leaving marks that would last long after the night ended. Her touch was both exhilarating and painful, a whirlwind of raw emotion that I couldn't comprehend. She pulled back, her eyes dark and hungry. "Do you feel it?" she whispered. Her voice was husky, laced with a raw intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "The hunger, the need, it's never enough." Before I could respond, Lola's hands gripped my throat, tightening with an almost unbearable pressure. She was choking me, her gaze never leaving mine as she watched the panic flicker in my eyes. It was a terrifying display of power, a reminder of the fragile nature of life. The air grew thick, the pressure building in my chest as I gasped for breath, my vision blurring at the edges. But then, just as quickly as she had started, she released me, and I coughed violently, gasping for air. My hand shot out to grab her, to pull her close again, to feel the connection that had consumed me, but she stepped back, a wicked smile curling on her lips. "You're mine now," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "You'll never be the same." I didn't know if I could trust myself anymore. She had broken something inside me, something I couldn't fix. My mind raced, trying to grasp onto the fragments of my identity, but they were shattered, scattered like broken glass. The line between reality and illusion had blurred, and I was lost in the murky waters of her desires. And I knew that no matter how far I ran, no matter how much I tried to escape, I would always be drawn back to her, to the madness she offered. It was a curse, a dark enchantment that bound me to her will. The last thing I remembered was her lips on my neck, her breath warm and sweet against my skin, as I gave in completely. I felt a strange sense of peace, a surrender to the darkness that had consumed me. My body was a vessel, a canvas upon which she painted her desires, and I was nothing more than a willing participant in her game. I was hers, body and soul, forever bound to the intoxicating madness of Lola. It's been years, but the memory still clings to me like smoke, thick and inescapable. I'd been studying folklore, researching tales of hauntings and hidden rituals lost in the folds of ancient forests, when Professor Blackwood invited me on an expedition. He was respected, enigmatic even, and when he extended the invitation, I didn't hesitate. Little did I know that my curiosity was leading me somewhere I'd never truly escape. The forest felt alive as we entered, its thick canopy blocking out the last traces of sunlight, swallowing us whole. Shadows clung to the trees like dark lace, and the air was damp, thick, pressing down on us, heavy with the scent of decaying leaves and something else, something primal and unsettling. I remember the professor leading the way, his gait brisk and confident as he carried his worn journal filled with decades of research, its leather cover slick with a strange, oily residue. "There's a place ahead," he said cryptically, his eyes gleaming with a strange intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. His voice, usually calm and measured, held a hint of manic excitement. As the forest deepened, the oppressive silence was broken only by the crunch of leaves under our boots and the occasional snap of a twig. The trees seemed to lean in, their gnarled branches like skeletal fingers reaching out, their leaves whispering secrets in the wind. Then, from the suffocating gloom, a figure emerged from the trees, her form like something conjured from an old myth, a nymph twisted into something darker, more sinister. She was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous, a presence that drew you in but warned you to stay away. Her skin was the color of moonlight on snow, her hair a cascade of raven black that seemed to drink in the little light that filtered through the canopy. Her eyes, however, were the most striking feature, pools of liquid obsidian that seemed to hold ancient secrets, 1,000 untold stories. The professor greeted her as if he'd known her all his life, his voice dropping to a reverent whisper as he called her name. I can still hear it echoing in my mind. "The whore," he said, almost with a twisted reverence, a possessive hunger in his tone that made my skin crawl. At first, she barely acknowledged me, her gaze fixed on the professor with an intensity that left me cold. There was an energy in the air, something dark, magnetic, that bound them together in a way I couldn't understand but felt deep in my bones, a raw, primal connection that whispered of forbidden desires and ancient pacts. She led us to a small clearing, a natural circle surrounded by tall, silent trees that seemed to watch, their branches like claws reaching down, their bark scarred with symbols I couldn't decipher. As she whispered to him in a language I couldn't understand, a guttural melody that vibrated in the depths of my being, the professor seemed entranced, captivated in a way I'd never seen. His eyes glazed over, his body swaying slightly, as if he were being pulled into a hypnotic trance. His normally controlled demeanor was shattered, replaced by a look of desperate longing that bordered on obsession. Her voice, a low, seductive purr, seemed to weave its way into his very soul, and I felt a surge of jealousy, a visceral reaction to the way she held him captive with her gaze and her words. But as the minutes wore on, she finally looked at me. Her eyes locked with mine, and I felt as though she could see straight into the darkest corners of my mind, bringing a chill that seeped into my skin, a chilling awareness of my own deepest desires and hidden fears. Her smile wasn't warm. It was hollow, a hint of cruelty in the curve of her lips, a predatory smirk that promised pain and pleasure in equal measure. "You came looking for something, didn't you?" she asked softly, her voice barely louder than a whisper. Her words wrapped around me, lingering in the air, making it hard to breathe, a venomous caress that stole the air from my lungs. I tried to answer, but the forest seemed to close in around me. I wanted to leave, but the professor remained transfixed, his body trembling with a suppressed need, his eyes locked onto hers as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. Shadows twisted at the edges of my vision, and I realized that we were no longer alone. Faint whispers rose from the trees, voices barely audible but laden with a potent sexuality that filled me with a strange mix of fear and fascination. Shapes danced just beyond the edge of the clearing, ethereal forms that shimmered and writhed in the darkness, their movements suggestive and disturbing. The woman laughed softly, almost mocking, a sound like the rustling of dry leaves underfoot, her fingers tracing the professor's arm as he stood frozen, his body responding to her touch in a way that was both disturbing and alluring. Her touch sent a shiver down his spine, a wave of longing that washed over him, his body reacting involuntarily. Her fingers moved lower, tracing the lines of his chest, her nails digging into his skin, leaving delicate crescent-shaped marks that bled a dark crimson. He moaned softly, a sound of mingled pleasure and pain, his eyes fluttering closed as if surrendering to the intoxicating sensation. Then, as if sensing my unease, she turned her attention fully on me. Her smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too unnatural, fangs that hinted at a darker nature, a predator's hunger for flesh. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing," she whispered, her voice laced with a seductive threat. "Some paths should remain unwalked." The forest seemed to close in tighter, and every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run as fast as my legs could carry me. I felt a strange pull towards her, a morbid curiosity that battled with my primal fear. Her eyes, those pools of obsidian, held an unspoken invitation, a promise of forbidden pleasure that sent tremors through my body. My breath hitched in my throat, a strangled gasp as my own desires warred with my sense of self-preservation. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a vortex of lust and dread. The shapes in the shadows moved closer, their forms becoming more defined, their movements more suggestive. They were a symphony of writhing flesh and ecstatic cries, a grotesque ballet that both repelled and enthralled me. I felt my own body react, a primal need awakening within me, a response to the raw sexuality emanating from the clearing, from the woman and the entities that surrounded her. My pulse quickened, my breath grew ragged, and a warmth spread through my lower body, a sensation both terrifying and intoxicating. My mind struggled to maintain its grip on reality, the line between sanity and surrender blurring with each passing moment. I could feel the eyes of the forest upon me, watching, judging, urging me to succumb to the primal urges that were bubbling to the surface. I finally managed to pull myself back, stumbling away from the clearing, not daring to look back. The last thing I saw was the professor, rooted to the spot, his gaze locked onto hers as she whispered things I'll never understand, her voice a hypnotic murmur that promised oblivion. He was a puppet in her hands, his will surrendered to her dark allure. I heard him calling for me as I ran, a desperate plea that was swallowed by the relentless whispers of the forest, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. And I never saw him again. I ran blindly through the suffocating darkness, my lungs burning, my muscles screaming in protest. The forest seemed to mock my desperation, the trees reaching out with their skeletal branches as if to grasp me, to pull me back into the heart of the darkness. I stumbled and fell, my skin tearing on the rough bark, but I forced myself to rise, driven by a terror that was both physical and spiritual. The memory of the professor's desperate pleas echoes in my mind, a constant reminder of the dangers of unchecked curiosity, of the price one pays for delving too deep into the hidden corners of the world. I never found out what happened to him, and maybe I don't want to know. The image of his body, ravaged and broken, consumed by the insatiable hunger of the whore and her spectral retinue, haunts my dreams, a chilling reminder of the fragility of human existence in the face of ancient, unyielding powers. To this day, I avoid forests and that strange, suffocating silence they hold. The mere scent of damp earth and decaying leaves sends a shiver down my spine, a reminder of the horrors I witnessed. Every now and then, I hear whispers in the night, faint and haunting, calling me back to that place, a siren song of forbidden knowledge and forbidden pleasure. The woman's words echo in the recesses of my mind, a constant reminder of the dangers of insatiable curiosity. "Curiosity is a dangerous thing," she whispered. "Some paths should remain unwalked. And a part of me wonders if one day I won't be able to resist, if the allure of the forbidden will be too strong to overcome. If I will succumb to the whispers, to the darkness that still lingers in the depths of my soul, and return to that clearing, to the arms of the hoar, to the embrace of the ancient forest that holds the key to my deepest desires and my darkest fears.